Someone is about to lean in close to your face. Maybe it's a first date. Maybe it's your boss standing right next to your desk. And right before they get close, one thought jumps into your head. Do I smell okay? You check, you pop a mint. Fixed in 2 seconds flat. Now take all of that away. No mints, no gum, no toothpaste, no dentist down the street. Just you, a mouth full of teeth worn down from 30 years of chewing rough bread, and a problem that isn't going away on its own. Bad breath didn't just ruin a first date back then. It could get you thrown out of an emperor's court. It could end a marriage. Honestly, in some places, it was seen as a sign that something inside your whole body had already gone wrong. So people had a choice: do nothing and pay the price, or fight back with whatever you could find. Stick around and you'll find out what a desert healer, a Roman poet, and an Indian doctor all figured out thousands of years before toothpaste existed. One of their tricks is something dentists are still trying to fully explain today, because one of these old fixes never really disappeared. It's probably sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now. You just never knew why it actually works.
Now, most people think ancient people just smelled bad, and nobody cared. No germs, no science, no reason to even try. That picture is wrong. Nobody back then knew the word bacteria, but they had thousands of years to test things and to remember what worked. A mother taught her daughter. A healer taught his student. And if a trick worked, it stuck. If it didn't, it got dropped. And here's the part that should surprise you. Modern labs have tested some of these old tricks on real bacteria, and more than one of them actually works. But not everything you've heard about this topic is true either. Some of these stories got twisted over hundreds of years. A joke turned into a fact. A legend turned into something people now repeat as real history. So before we go any further, we're going to set the record straight. Which tricks were real science hiding in plain sight, and which ones are just good stories that never actually happened?
Let's start where the problem began in the first place, ancient Egypt. Because for them, this wasn't just about smelling bad. Something ordinary and trusted completely was slowly destroying the one thing that stood between them and a healthy mouth, and it would take thousands of years before anyone figured out what. And because this is where the pattern for this entire video starts, a real problem met with a real solution long before anyone had the science to explain why it worked. You might guess the problem was sugar, or dirty water, or maybe they just never learned to brush. None of that is what actually happened. The real answer was something much closer to home, something they ate every single day without ever questioning it, something they trusted so much they packed it into tombs so the dead would have it in the next life too: their bread. And I already know what you're thinking. Everyone knows bread is bad for your teeth. Too much of it, too soft, too much sugar, old news. But that's not what was happening here. It wasn't the bread itself. It was something hidden inside it, something they couldn't see and couldn't taste, no matter how hard they looked. There were no dentists in ancient Egypt, no pain medicine either. If a tooth got infected badly enough, it could kill you. And the thing responsible for that pain wasn't hiding somewhere far away. It was sitting on their plate at every single meal for their entire life.
Egyptian bread wasn't made in a factory. It was ground by hand between two heavy stones. And stone wears down. Every time they ground their grain, tiny bits of sand and rock dust broke off and mixed in with the flour. So every loaf carried a little bit of grit. One loaf wouldn't hurt you, but a lifetime of loaves? That grit worked like sandpaper on the inside of their mouths every single day. Paleopathologists, scientists who study disease in ancient bones, have examined mummies from Egypt's New Kingdom, and the damage is still there to see. Teeth worn down flat. Some worn so far the soft inside of the tooth was left completely exposed. And here's the part that should surprise you. This wasn't just happening to old people. Some of the worst damage shows up in mummies who were still young. So they fought back the only way they knew how. Early on, they scrubbed their teeth with a rough paste made from crushed ox hooves, ash, burnt eggshell, and pumice. It was not gentle, it scraped. Centuries later, by the 4th century AD, they had upgraded the formula, and this time they wrote it down. A surviving papyrus lays it out in full: rock salt, mint, dried iris flower, a pinch of pepper, ground together into a powder the papyrus itself calls perfect teeth. But here's the disturbing part. In 2003, at a real dental conference in Vienna, dentists mixed up a batch of that older, rougher paste and tried it themselves. It hurt, it made their gums bleed, but every single one of them said the same thing afterward. Their mouths felt properly clean. Thousands of years before toothpaste tubes and electric toothbrushes, they had already found something that worked. It just came at a cost. But scrubbing away years of damage with crushed eggshells was never going to fix the real problem underneath it. In another part of the ancient world, people were about to solve this with something completely different. Not a paste you mixed once and used up, but a tool that kept working long after they'd already put it down. That tool was a chewing stick. Long before the toothbrush, people in ancient Mesopotamia broke a twig off a specific tree, chewed the end until it turned soft, and used it to clean their teeth. Archaeological finds across the region point to evidence going back over 5,000 years, deep enough that we're talking about one of the very first civilizations on Earth. And here's what should surprise you. This wasn't just a stick. It was closer to a living toothbrush. The tree is called Salvadora persica. Today, it's still used across the Middle East and parts of Africa, and it even has a name you might recognize: miswak. Ayurvedic physicians, writing in an old medical text called the Ashtanga Hridayam, recommended the same idea. Chew on the right stem, and you clean your teeth and your tongue at the same time. You'd assume this was just a rough stick doing a rough scrubbing, nothing more. But when researchers tested the wood in a lab, publishing their results in the International Journal for Multidisciplinary Research, they found something they weren't expecting. The stick releases a natural chemical that actually attacks the exact bacteria responsible for gum disease and bad breath. And here's the part that should really bother your local toothbrush. That same research found people using this stick had fewer cavities than people using a manufactured toothbrush. A twig. Doing a job we now pay for in a tube. But not every ancient fix stayed this quiet or this personal. Somewhere else, an entire empire was about to turn this exact same problem into a matter of state. One where getting it wrong didn't just cost you a conversation, it cost you the room where the most powerful man alive was sitting. That empire was China. If you think this was just about manners, you'd be wrong. In the Han court, fresh breath wasn't a nice thing to have, it was the law. A real Han Dynasty legal document called the Han Guan Yi ordered every official to chew on a clove before they were allowed to speak to the emperor. Not a suggestion, a requirement. Get it wrong, and you didn't just embarrass yourself, you risked your entire career in a single breath. There's a story about a Tang Dynasty poet named Song Jiwen, recorded in an old collection called the Ben Shi Shi. Song fell out of favor with the court for exactly this reason. His breath cost him the one thing he wanted most: the emperor's attention. Historians today can't confirm every detail of that story, but it survived for over 1,000 years for one simple reason. Everyone in that court understood exactly how real the danger was. So why cloves? Turns out they weren't just picking something with a strong smell. Peer-reviewed dental research has since tested the oil inside cloves directly. It attacks Porphyromonas gingivalis, the exact same bacteria that miswak stick was fighting on the other side of the world, with nobody involved on either side having any idea the other existed. Two unconnected civilizations, same enemy, same weapon, hiding inside two completely different plants. Not every story from this world holds up the same way, though. Some stick around for 1,000 years, not because they're true, but because everyone wants them to be. And the next one on this list might be the oldest, most repeated story about ancient hygiene there is.
That myth is Rome. Maybe you already heard this one. Ancient Romans brushed their teeth with urine. It might be the single most repeated fact about ancient hygiene there is. But here's the problem. It's not exactly true. There was a Roman poet named Catullus. In one of his poems, he mocked a man named Ignatius, who smiled constantly, and showed off a set of teeth that were almost blinding white. Catullus had a theory about why. He accused Ignatius of scrubbing his teeth every single morning with his own urine. But look closer, and the joke falls apart. Ignatius wasn't Roman. He was from Spain, from a region called Celtiberia. And Catullus wasn't describing something normal Roman people did. He was mocking a foreign habit to make Ignatius look like an outsider. And here's the part historians find even more interesting. The classical scholar James Uden has a theory about that constant smile. He thinks it wasn't about hygiene at all. It may have been a sign of a certain kind of calm that some people followed at the time. Catullus took that and twisted it into a dirty joke. And here's the twist inside the twist. The insult might have been true anyway. Urine breaks down into ammonia. Ammonia really does clean and whiten teeth, so Ignatius's smile probably was that white, for exactly the reason Catullus mocked him for. There's one more piece to this most people never hear. Romans really did collect urine in huge amounts, so much the Emperor Vespasian taxed it, but it wasn't going into anyone's mouth. It went straight to the laundries to clean their togas. So the myth isn't completely made up, it's just aimed at the wrong mouth. But not everyone who dealt with this problem used it to mock someone. In one final place, on the other side of the world, this exact same problem became something completely different. Not a joke, not a punishment, a quiet ritual, done every single morning, long before anyone touched a single tooth.
That final place is India. Because here's something that changes everything you've heard so far. Most bad breath doesn't actually start at your teeth. It starts on your tongue. And thousands of years ago, in India, people already seemed to know it. Every morning, before eating, before drinking, before anything else, they did one thing first. They scraped their tongue. Ancient medical texts, the Shraka Samhita and the Sushruta Samhita, laid out exact rules for this. The scraper had to be a certain length. The edges had to be smooth, so they wouldn't cut the tongue. And the material mattered most of all. Copper, sometimes silver, sometimes gold. You might guess that was just about status, a rich person's ritual, using expensive metal to look important. That guess is wrong. Modern labs tested copper on its own, against real bacteria. Not old bacteria, not weak ones, E. coli and Salmonella. And copper killed them, fast. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. Scraping the tongue with that copper edge doesn't just move bacteria around. It physically removes the exact layer of bacteria responsible for most bad breath in one single stroke every single morning. Which means, out of everyone on this list, the ones who might have actually solved the problem first weren't the ones scrubbing their teeth at all. They were the ones who looked somewhere else completely. So, think back to that moment at the start. Someone leaning in close, that flash of worry, you reaching for a mint without a second thought. That mint only hides the problem for a few minutes. Thousands of years ago, in India, someone had already found a way to actually remove it. No mint has ever been able to say that.